Chapter 591. The crowd looked at the girl with a smile on their faces. She had smooth skin and was filled with youthful vigor. She was indeed a beautiful girl. It was common for beautiful girls to fall for heroes, and it was not a bad thing, so they thought it was wonderful. However, Wilbur sighed to himself when he saw the beautiful girl. That beautiful girl was Whitney. Wilbur thought that Whitney was too much of a schemer. She immediately wanted to get close to him because he had become superior to others. Her intention could not be any more obvious. Wilbur did not like her anymore, so he said coldly, "This is a gathering for cultivators. It's better if you girls leave." Then, he glanced at Shelby, who was nearby. He walked into Octacarm while being swarmed by Matt and the others. Whitney was instantly blushing from embarrassment and indignation. She thought no one could resist her beauty, so she took the initiative to hit on Wilbur. However, he rejected a beauty like her without a second thought, leaving her feeling awkward from his rejection. Shelby and the others walked over to persuade her. "We should leave. Something major happened here, so it'll be very troublesome." Whitney could only step down. She left with Shelby and the others, and she has lost interest in Ian. She looked back with a puzzled gaze before she left. Where did that fraud run off to? The tourists who recovered from their fear quickly fled the scene at that moment. It was too scary for them. They did not dare linger for a second more. Wilbur and the others were seated inside Octacarm. The first floor was spacious enough that it easily housed several dozen people. The owner, Ty, had a huge smile on his face. He personally served dishes for everyone, and he was cheerfully occupied. Everyone looked at Wilbur with excitement after the dishes were served. They felt proud of the marvelous cultivator that appeared in the Cardin province. It was as though their status was boosted because of Wilbur. They believed that Cardin province would grow to greater heights under his leadership. They would be unstoppable globally. Wilbur raised his glass, so everyone followed suit. He said, "I understand how you all feel right now. I, Trevor Penn, feel deeply honored too." Everyone finally knew that his name was Trevor Penn. Wilbur switched up and said, "However, I'm quite occupied with work, so I can't take on the role of the chairman." Everyone was taken aback for a moment. Then they looked disappointed. No one else could command respect if Trevor did not take on the role of the chairman. It would be impossible to rally the strength of the Cardin province cultivators. Wilbur said, "I feel quite embarrassed to not help since you're all so passionate. How about this?" Everyone listened closely. Matt Lilith, Gerard Torrent, and Ian Owens should continue to run the Cultivators Association. Everyone can feel free to join too. We'll form our own committee and elect a chairman. I'll be an honorary chairman. Of course, I'll step in if there are any significant matters within the Cultivators Association. How about that? Everyone thought about it and felt like it could work. Trevor was already the leader in their minds. Regardless of who became the chairman, they would need Trevor to step in if anything major happened within the Cultivators Association. They thought it through and agreed. They thought that everything was acceptable as long as Wilbur acknowledged the Cultivators Association and acknowledged them as members. Wilbur smiled and raised his glass, taking a drink to show his appreciation. Everyone raised their glasses and drank too. Chapter 592. Also, I think we should let Chester Ray and Zeke Yancey be the guardians of the Cultivators Association. They can help if you have something you can't resolve. I'll step in if they can't resolve it either. How about that? Chester and Zeke were sanctuary-level cultivators. Everyone witnessed their battle too. Although Chester lost to Zeke, they did not dare to underestimate him. They had to be respectful towards Chester. Zeke was not a Cardin province cultivator, but he surrendered to Wilbur, and he was better than Chester. They had no objections for Zeke to be a guardian. Therefore, everyone stood and toasted those two. Chester had no objections to what Wilbur said, so he gladly accepted it. Zeke was flattered because he became a guardian even though he was freshly defeated, which meant his master had no intentions of punishing him. He was overjoyed, so he raised his glass with a huge smile on his face. Everyone drank cheerfully. Then, they started to elect a chairman because of Wilbur's suggestion. Everyone knew that the chairman would either be Matt Lilith, Gerard Torrent, or Ian Owens. They were the founders of the Cultivators Association, after all. They chose Matt Lilith in the end because he was the eldest. Gerard and Ian were elected as vice chairman. Then Ian proposed that they should elect a branch chairman of the Cultivators Association in various regions. The branch chairman would be responsible for recruiting and overseeing cultivators in their respective regions. It was worth noting that those individuals were top-tier experts in their region. They had no issue at all to serve as branch chairman. Therefore, the Cardin Province Cultivators Association was officially founded. Wilbur was the honorary chairman, but the association was in fact created for him. They made Wilbur their leader. They had formed a unified community that gave everyone a strong sense of belonging. All of that was built upon his formidable power, which made them willingly submit to him. They were glad to participate. Everyone began to drink after the matter was finalized. Octocarm was filled with laughter, the sounds of clinking glasses, and hearty toasts. The meal lasted from the afternoon until a little after 5 o'clock. Finally, the cultivators reluctantly said their goodbyes after some persuasion from Wilbur. Some of them were wasted, so Ty provided rooms to accommodate them. Wilbur left the drunken inn with Matt and the others. Ty walked them to the gates and watched them leave. They went back to Sea Lake Island. Wilbur called them to his room, and everyone stood with hands behind their backs. Wilbur looked at Zeke and asked after a long pause, "Do you really want me to be your master?" Zeke panicked and fell to his knees immediately, replying, "I genuinely want to. I swear to God. But I don't plan to accept disciples at the moment," said Wilbur nonchalantly. Zeke was instantly dumbfounded. He quickly said, "Sir, I genuinely want to be your disciple. Please accept me." "No, but you can be my follower. You can swear by it if you want to," said Wilbur slowly. "Well, I will need to teach him if I accept students. I don't have time for that," Wilbur thought to himself. Zeke was a seasoned cultivator, so he knew that being a follower meant he had to serve Wilbur as his subordinate. Zeke was stunned for a moment. Then he swore to become Wilbur's follower without hesitation. Wilbur smiled faintly. He became the honorary chairman of the Cultivators Association using the name of Trevor Penn. He did not want to be involved into many things that would get in the way of his cultivation. Accepting disciples was out of the question for him. He had not discovered anyone with great potential at the moment, so he would not accept disciples. Matt and the others were relieved. Zeke would be out of their leagues if he became a disciple. How would they face him in the future if he became Wilbur's disciple? Their thoughts were mostly fueled by their jealousy. How could they let Zeke become Wilbur's disciple before them? Suddenly, the phone rang. Wilbur glanced at the screen and hurriedly answered the call. He asked, "Are you looking for me, Mr. Grayson?" Chapter 593. Mr. Grayson sounded displeased on the phone. "Wilbur, you moved out of Castleberry without telling anyone, and you haven't sent any messages. Have you forgotten about me?" "I wouldn't dare. I've been too occupied lately. I was just thinking about visiting you soon." Wilbur held great respect for a founding hero like him. He had given his blood, sweat, and tears for a new Dasha. After all, regardless of his current position, his effort was worth remembering for future generations to come. "Don't try to fool me. Come over tonight. I would like a drink with you." "All right. I'm free tonight. I'll be right over." "That's more like it." With that said, Benjamin ended the call. Wilbur let out a long sigh of relief. Everyone looked at Wilbur with dumbfounded expressions. They wondered who the hell was on the line for Wilbur to be so respectful. Wilbur said, "That was Benjamin Grayson." Everyone came to a realization. Benjamin Grayson was a distinguished statesman who had retired from the highest echelons of power in the nation. Everyone had to show him respect regardless of who they were. Someone important like Mr. Grayson invited Wilbur to his house. That act itself showed how significant Wilbur was to Mr. Grayson. Wilbur then said, "You guys go ahead. I have matters to attend to." The rest of them did not dare to disturb him from meeting with Mr. Grayson, so they left. Wilbur sat on the sofa and let out a deep sigh. He felt like he could never rest, and his job was never ending, so he felt annoyed. His identity had become rather extraordinary, and the demands from various parties prevented him from taking a break. Someone as powerful as him still could not resist the progression of destiny. He had no choice, and he could not resist. There was nothing he could do about it. Faye walked in when he was sighing. She looked slightly upset. Wilbur immediately remembered that he promised to dine with Faye. He said with a guilty tone, "I'm so sorry, but I'm busy again tonight. I promise you I'll be free tomorrow night." "That's not what I want to talk to you about." Faye looked depressed as she sat next to Wilbur. Wilbur asked in a puzzling tone, "What's wrong? Did something happen?" "The day after tomorrow is my grandpa's 70th birthday. He told me to go back home," Faye replied while looking at Wilbur. He hurriedly said, "That's major. You have to go back. Leave Cape Consortium to the vice CEO. You don't have to worry." Actually, Wilbur felt ashamed that he knew nothing about Faye's family. He only knew that her old home was in Eagle City of Yowl Province. She said slowly, "I'm not worried about work. I heard that besides celebrating my grandpa's birthday, my family arranged a spouse for me. They wanted me to be engaged to him on my grandpa's birthday." "Are you joking? You've never met the guy. So how can you be engaged to him?" He was instantly upset. He was in a relationship with her, so he would not allow other people to tear them apart. She instantly smiled when she heard that. She said, "So, I want you to come with me tomorrow. You should reveal your identity to my family and announce our relationship to reject the engagement." "All right. I'll go with you tomorrow. I want to see who's so audacious." Wilbur agreed without hesitation. Who had the gall to try and steal his girl from him? That guy must be tired of living. Faye said joyously, "It's settled then. We'll board a plane tomorrow afternoon." "Sure thing." Chapter 594. She immediately kissed him, then stood up and said, "You should rest early tonight." "Yeah. Mr. Grayson invited me over to his house. I wonder what he wants." Wilbur knew that Mr. Grayson would not purely invite him over to drink. She nodded and said, "You can be careless with Mr. Grayson. Go ahead and prepare for the visit. I won't disturb you anymore." Then, she left gracefully. Her elegant figure made Wilbur nod in approval. However, she looked worried again after she went back to her room. They left home after graduating because she was dissatisfied with the rigid traditions of her family. She moved to Suitor Town and made a living on her own. However, it was clear that her family did not intend to leave her alone. She definitely had to go back to celebrate her grandpa's birthday, but she learned from a childhood friend that her grandpa planned to arrange an engagement for her during the birthday celebration. The man was from an influential background, and her family was determined to make the marriage happen. She called her father after she found out, but Fabian was not in Eagle City. He had a conflict with her grandfather in his early years, which led to his departure from home. He made a name for himself in Endler Province and established himself in Hull City. Fabian was technically no longer considered part of the Eve family. His mother passed away a long time ago. The person in charge of the Eve family was her grandfather, Asher Eve. Fabian could not do anything about it. Not even the boss of Cape Consortium could stop the engagement from being arranged, let alone Fabian Eve. She had no choice but to ask Wilbur to resolve the issue. She did not want to be sacrificed for an arranged marriage, regardless of who the spouse was. She believed that Wilbur was capable enough to resolve the issue. She thought about that and felt relieved. Wilbur arrived at Benjamin's house at that moment. Benjamin prepared a table full of food and wine. Gordon Grayson and his daughter, Susie Grayson, were also there. They happily welcomed Wilbur to the table so he could dine with them. Wilbur looked at the feast on the table and said awkwardly, "This is a bit of an overkill, Mr. Grayson." Benjamin raised his glass and chuckled. He said, "This is to thank you for providing the army with pills and combat skills. Otherwise, I wouldn't be so extravagant." "Well, it's nothing to worry about. You don't have to think too much about it." Wilbur raised his glass. He drank with Benjamin and Gordon. Gordon said, "Mr. Penn, you have to know that ever since we started using the pills you provided and practiced your combat skills, our Special Forces team has defeated the Suitor Town Special Forces unit in a national combat competition in just 2 months. We have received great recognition and support from the government. They allocated a significant budget, and I've been authorized to expand the team. I've benefited greatly from this." "That's great to hear. It seems my efforts were not in vain," said Wilbur with a smile. Gordon continued with excitement. "That's not all. The nation officially declared my Special Forces team as a national-level Special Forces team. It's called the Hidden Dragon Special Forces Team. I've been tasked with recruiting top-tier members for training, so I was promoted because of that. How impressive! A promotion is quite remarkable. Given Gordon's rank, his position is almost equivalent to Benjamin's, so a promotion is quite scary, Wilbur pondered. Congratulations. Wilbur felt happy for Gordon and raised his glass for a toast. Benjamin smiled and returned a toast to Wilbur. Benjamin was just as happy. His son had an achievement, which made him feel very proud. Everyone drank in celebration. Suddenly, Benjamin asked, "What have you been up to? How are you so busy that we don't even see you?" Wilbur sighed and replied, "I've been so busy that I have no time to rest. I have to go to Eagle City tomorrow." Benjamin frowned and said, "Eagle City? What a coincidence. Help me send a message to Braxton Yeager. Tell him to be honest and upright in his official duties before I deal with him myself." Chapter 595. Wilbur was stumped. He asked, "Who's Braxton Yeager?" "The person in charge of Eagle City. He's one of my father's subordinates back then," Gordon said with a smile. Wilbur came to a realization, but he smiled wryly and said, "Mr. Grayson, Eagle City is a governed city under the jurisdiction of the nation. The person in charge is the vice governor, right? I'm afraid it wouldn't be appropriate for me to convey such a message, would it?" Benjamin spoke loudly. "Why would it be inappropriate? Cedric Wayne, the person in charge of Yowl Province, was only my father's soldier back then. Braxton Yeager was my horseboy back then. Does he dare to argue with me?" "You're impressive. Really impressive. I'll remember that. I'll make sure to convey your message if I ever meet him." Wilbur stuck out his tongue wryly. Benjamin was indeed a founding father of the nation, with such high-ranking officials under his command. It was clear how powerful his influence was in Dasha. Gordon poured a glass of wine for Wilbur. He smiled and said, "Mr. Penn, there's actually something else I'd like to discuss with you." "Go ahead and tell me." Wilbur started to dig in. Gordon said, "I would like you to become the instructor of the Hidden Dragon Special Forces team. What do you think?" Wilbur spat out his food. Luckily, he turned his head just in time, so it did not get on the table. "Buddy, don't assign any jobs for me, all right? I'm very busy as it is," said Wilbur in a helpless tone. Gordon said, "Sir, this is a matter of national importance. A job to nurture talent and safeguard the nation." "Think it over, Wilbur. Give it your best if you can do it," added Benjamin. Wilbur realized that he probably could not refuse when he heard that. It was challenging to turn it down when the matter was framed with the mantle of national duty. He had no choice but to say, "I'll think about it. Give me some time, all right? I've been too busy recently." "All right. Do think it through. I have faith in you." Benjamin laughed and raised his glass. Wilbur raised his glass helplessly, and they all downed their drinks. Roughly an hour later, Wilbur had his fill of food and drinks. He said goodbye to Benjamin and Gordon and then returned to Sea Lake Island. He felt like he had been tricked by Benjamin and Gordon when he sat in his room. He had agreed to train a special forces team foolishly. Training a special forces team was no easy task. Many of them might be really tough nuts to crack. However, he had to agree for Mr. Grayson's sake. He decided to leave the matter alone. Wilbur shook his head and went back to his room before entering the demiplane. He would be meeting Faye's grandfather tomorrow, so he had to prepare some gifts. He came before the dragon's altar and sacrificed a bronze bell, but he only received 30 grace points. It was a pathetic amount. There were so few grace points that it did not trigger a recommendation on the screen. There was only a list of options for exchange. He looked at the screen for a while and found a type of pill called the Elixir of Life. The Elixir of Life can enhance the vitality of ordinary individuals and extend their lifespan. 30 grace points are required. The pill was made for ordinary people, so it did not require many grace points. However, the pill looked awful with its jet black color. What the hell? Wilbur felt frustrated at its awful appearance, but there were simply too few options with the amount of grace points. He exchanged the Elixir of Life as a gift for their first meeting. Wilbur exited the demiplane and went to sleep after all that. The next morning, He got up early and went to a jewelry store to buy an exquisite box. He placed the elixir of life inside. The pill looked so awful that he had to use nicer packaging to enhance its appeal. It was around 11 o'clock by the time he finished the preparations. Faye had been waiting for him when he returned. They went to the airport in a hurry and boarded the flight to Eagle City. Chapter 596. Eagle City was part of Yaol Province. It was the top economic area in Dasha, and also a place with a lot of rich people. The economy was comparable to Zealand and Suitor town. Faye explained her family history to Wilbur on the plane. The Eve were considered an upper-class family in Suitor town. They were in the overseas trading industry and had a net worth of several $billion. However, having a net worth of a few $billion was nothing special in Eagle City. Many individuals there had net worths in the tens or hundreds of billions of dollars, especially the Clarks, the Wilsons, and the Zinks. Those three families had net worths in the hundreds of billions. They were undoubtedly the three giants in Eagle City. The Eve family were also well known, mainly because they had a beauty named Faye Eve. When Faye became a young adult, her beauty outshone everyone in Eagle City. She earned the title of the #1 beauty in Eagle City, and it attracted the pursuit of many wealthy men. Her grandfather rejected them all and sent her abroad for further education. It was an inspiring story that boosted the family's reputation. Her family arranged an engagement and kept it a secret from her. She could tell that her spouse was someone significant. However, her heart belonged to Wilbur. No one could sway her feelings. She was willing to stand her ground even if her family opposed their relationship. Wilbur said after he was aware of the family history, "Don't worry. You're mine. So no one can force you into anything, and no one can take you away. I know you're capable. Just don't make a huge mess. My grandfather is 70 years old, after all," she reminded. He nodded and said, "I'll reel it in." She laughed. The plane landed after 2 hours. One of Faye's subordinates was waiting at the airport. He was a 30-year-old man named Ezra Miller, and he was there to pick them up. Faye said after they met up, "We'll go to the hotel first." "Understood." Ezra looked fresh with a pair of glasses. He looked like the gentle type. Faye introduced him to Wilbur. Ezra worked for the government as a civil servant. They had been neighbors since they were kids and grew up together, so they were very close. Wilbur was respectful enough towards Ezra. The three of them came to a hotel and checked into their rooms. Faye asked, "Ezra, why won't you tell me who's the guy my family wanted to set me up with? Are we close friends or what?" "I wouldn't dare," Ezra replied in a helpless tone. She frowned and asked, "Why not? Just tell me. My boyfriend is the boss of Cape Consortium. Do you think I'll be afraid?" That was the first time Faye revealed Wilbur's identity to someone else, which showed her trust in Ezra. Ezra cast a weird glance at Wilbur, then said, "The Cape Consortium is astounding, but it's limited to Cardin Province. You should know that your family wants to introduce you to the most eligible bachelor in Eagle City, the son of the person in charge of Eagle City, Braxton Yeager. I'm afraid Cape Consortium can't compare to that, even if you have a branch in Eagle City, right?" Faye was taken aback. It was no wonder her family decided her marriage behind her back. He was a huge deal. Not only was he rich, but he could decide the fate of all the families in Eagle City, even the three major families there. She instantly felt worried. The man exceeded her expectations. Ezra shrugged and said, "Now that you know who he is, do you have any solutions?" She frowned and remained silent. Ezra had to shake his head. A strong family background and loads of money meant nothing when it came to the most eligible bachelor in Eagle City. The real power in Dasha was in the hands of those people. Rich businessmen and affluent families were nothing when compared to absolute power. However, Wilbur said slowly, "I don't care who he is. How dare he set his sights on Faye? He better watch out." Chapter 597. "No way. Are you that confident, Mr. Penn?" Ezra thought that Wilbur was a young and competent man because he was the boss of Cape Consortium. That was no easy feat. However, businessmen meant nothing to those in power. Moreover, Cape Consortium was an overseas enterprise. They had a new branch in Eagle City, but it would not change the situation. The Eves would benefit more if Faye were married to the Yeagers. Compared to marrying the boss of Cape Consortium, it was only a matter of time for the Eves to rise to power in Eagle City if the marriage was a success. The Eves would eventually become the top family in Eagle City. Would that not be much better for the Eves than marrying Wilbur? However, Wilbur smiled and said, "We'll see. No one can stop me, and no one can force Faye. You have guts, and I'm very impressed by that. But you better be careful," said Ezra. Wilbur replied, "Thanks for looking out for me. I'll remember it." "All right. I'll leave you guys to figure it out. I have work in the afternoon, so I'll be taking my leave." Ezra got up to leave. Wilbur and Faye said goodbye and went back to their room. She asked anxiously, "What should we do?" "There's nothing to be afraid of because I'm here. You should just celebrate your grandfather's birthday," Wilbur reassured Faye. Faye had no choice but to rely on Wilbur. After that, they went out to shop for some expensive gifts. They planned to go to Faye's house the following day. The birthday party was happening tomorrow anyway, so they were in no hurry. Faye was also worried that Wilbur would be picked on if they went back early. She did not want them to be upset, so she decided to stay at the hotel for the moment. Wilbur and Faye arrived at the restaurant on the top floor of the hotel and enjoyed a candlelight dinner in the evening. They had steak and wine under the candlelight, exchanging conversations in whispers from time to time. All in all, it was a rather wholesome and peaceful meal. There was a young man in his 20s near them. He looked like a troublemaker and had a luxury brand suit on. He was also dining with a woman. All the while, he was looking at Faye and Wilbur with a puzzled look. He sneakily took a photo of them after some time, then sent it to someone. Soon, he received a reply. He read it and felt his expression stiffen up right after. He told his date, "You should eat. I have some work to do." "What are you doing? You finally have the time to accompany me for dinner. Are you busy again?" The beautiful woman seemed displeased. She was considered a celebrity and had been quite popular recently. However, the man said in a low voice, "This is men's business, so stop nagging." The celebrity instantly shut up obediently. She sat down with a pitiful look, but the man ignored her. He wiped his mouth with a napkin, then approached Wilbur and Faye. "Miss Eve?" asked the man while smiling. Faye looked up, frowning. Then she smiled and said, "Oh, it's you, Mr. Clark. What a coincidence." "Yeah, this is truly a coincidence." Then, he sat next to them confidently. Faye introduced him by saying, "This is Zaron Clark from one of the 3 major families in Eagle City. He's very famous. This is my boyfriend, Wilbur Penn." Chapter 598. Wilbur smiled to be polite, but Zaron did not return the smile. He frowned and asked, "Mr. Penn, right? Do you know that Miss Eve is Mr. Yeager's fiancée?" "I don't," Wilbur replied nonchalantly. Zaron frowned and said, "Well, you know now. Get out of here immediately or you'll suffer a horrible death." 2 bodyguards in black suits quietly appeared next to him while he spoke, glaring at Wilbur all the while. Wilbur glanced at them, then back at Zaron, saying slowly, "Those who dare talk to me like that don't end well. I suggest you reconsider before speaking again." "He's my boyfriend, Mr. Clark. Don't you think you're crossing the line here?" Faye asked angrily. Zaron simply smiled and said, "I'm sorry, Miss Eve. I didn't mean to disrespect you. But you should know that your grandfather has agreed to your engagement with Mr. Yeager, yet you're dining at a hotel with a random man. This will only make it difficult for you to face your family if news gets out. Furthermore, it'll be embarrassing for Mr. Yeager too. I'm not going to be engaged to Mr. Yeager, so you don't need to worry about that, Mr. Clark," she said politely. Zaron shook his head. "You know who Mr. Yeager is. He always gets what he wants, and he won't allow mistakes. I only meddled in this affair because I ran into you. I'm asking him to leave safely for your sake. You shouldn't be angry at your family. Many girls dream of marrying Mr. Yeager. It's not an insult to the Eves." Zaron was being polite, as he thought that the Eves were lucky to be involved with the Yeagers. "I have a boyfriend, and I'm bringing him home tomorrow to meet my grandfather. I won't be meeting Mr. Yeager," said Faye with determination. Zaron instantly frowned when he heard that. He turned to order his men after a moment. "Inform the owner to clear the venue. I'll bear all the costs." "Yes, sir." One of the bodyguards walked to look for the restaurant owner. Soon, A middle-aged man and a few managers started to ask the customers to leave. Some of the customers were unhappy, but they immediately left after they heard about Zaron Clark. Only Wilbur, Faye, Zaron, and his men were left in the restaurant. It was a 5-star hotel, thus the decorations were grand and fanciful. The restaurant only catered to the rich. Naturally, the owner of the restaurant was also one of rather high social standing. However, he had to comply with any requests from Zaron, even if it affected his business. That showed how much influence Zaron held in Eagle City. Zaron said slowly after the restaurant was cleared, "Miss Eve, I didn't resort to violence because of you and Mr. Yeager. Things could get ugly if you keep insisting otherwise. You should know that Mr. Yeager can't afford to have any scandals. Mr. Clark, can you mind your business? Besides, my relationship with Mr. Yeager has nothing to do with you, right?" asked Faye. Zaron smiled and asked, "Don't you know, each family and every businessman in Eagle City have to protect, respect, and defend Mr. Yeager's reputation. We can't possibly let him suffer a negative scandal. It's common knowledge. I heard you're the CEO of a major enterprise, so you should know that, right?" Frankly, he was telling the truth. No one dared to disrespect Farron Campbell in Seachertown. His status and reputation had to be respected. Insulting Farron would be like insulting Orrin Campbell. No one in Cardin Province could afford to offend Orrin. It was the same in Eagle City. Mr. Yeager was not inferior to Farron. His status might be superior. It was reasonable for Zaron to defend Mr. Yeager. Wilbur frowned and said, "I'm not against it if you want to butter up to Mr. Yeager, but you can't afford to speak rudely toward Faye. You're outrageous. Get out of here immediately or suffer the consequences," Zaron yelled. The bodyguards stood beside Wilbur as Zaron spoke. They were ready to attack. Faye wanted to talk them out of it, but Wilbur yelled coldly before she could speak, "Are you trying to die?" Chapter 599. Zaron was furious. He waved and said, "Throw him out." The bodyguards immediately attacked. They reached out to place their hands on Wilbur's shoulders. Just when they were about to touch his shoulders, a tremendous force blew them away instantly. Wilbur stood up and slapped Zaron in the face. The slap resonated loudly in the room. Zaron fell headfirst to the floor, stunned by the outcome. He felt dizzy and he was seeing stars, barely able to remain conscious. Wilbur said coldly, "No one can change my mind. And that includes that Yeager guy. Who the hell are you to bark in my face?" Faye hurriedly stood up to pull Wilbur away, urging him, "Let's just leave." Wilbur nodded, and they left together. Zaron finally realized what happened. He touched his tingling hot face and could not believe that it was real. Zaron screamed after a long while to express his anger. The bodyguards did not dare to approach him, standing far away with a fearful look in their eyes. They knew that someone was bound to die if Zaron got angry. They did not dare to be involved. "Fuck! How dare he hit me? That's equivalent to slapping Mr. Yeager. Very well. I swear I will make you suffer a horrible death." Zaron left without saying anything. He could not kill Wilbur because of Faye, but he would bury him alive at the birthday party tomorrow. Wilbur and Faye went back to the hotel room. She sighed and said, "The birthday party hasn't begun, and we're already getting into trouble. There's nothing to be afraid of because I'm here. I'd like to see who would dare to do anything to harm you." Wilbur growled in a low voice. Faye sighed, "I know you're not afraid, but it's my grandpa's birthday after all. If this ruins his birthday, I'm afraid I might piss him off further." Wilbur frowned and said, "I'll try my best to hold back, but if they keep crossing the line and force you to do what you don't want, I'll have no choice but to step in." "Hold on. We should stay here for the night and go in the afternoon tomorrow. We'll shorten the time we need to be there. That way it won't be so troublesome," Faye suggested. Wilbur nodded. Meanwhile, Zaron was pacing frantically in his living room with a menacing look on his face. He had never been treated this way as one of the 3 most important figures of his generation in Eagle City. He wanted to bring his men and rip that guy to shreds. However, he felt like it was inappropriate after giving it some thought. He could not do that in front of Faye because he had to respect the Eves. He wanted to tell Justin Yeager about the incident, but Justin would be furious if he knew. Zaron thought about it and felt that he could not afford to bear Justin's wrath by being the messenger of bad news. The idea was held back after some consideration. It seemed like Faye was planning to bring Wilbur to the birthday party tomorrow. Doing that in front of Justin was a bold move. Zaron felt like it would not end well for the Eves if Faye insisted on doing so. If that was the case, he would be justified in dealing with Wilbur. On the one hand, he could please Justin, and on the other hand, he could exact revenge. It was a great plan that killed two birds with one stone. He laughed maliciously when he thought of that. With Wilbur's demise as good as written in stone, he could wait for one more night. As one of the three prominent bachelors of Eagle City, Zaron was not interested in the Eves, and he would not normally be bothered to celebrate Asher Eve's birthday. However, he needed to attend the birthday party. It was not a mere birthday party because it also served as the engagement day for Justin and Faye. It was only natural for the heirs of the three major families to show up, and there would be quite a crowd too. Tomorrow will be a disastrous day for the Eves too, right? Zaron wondered. Chapter 600. Zaron laughed and called up Caleb Zink and Jonathan Wilson. He informed them of what happened with Wilbur. It was only a minor drama if it happened to ordinary people, but it was a terrifying incident when Justin Yeager was involved. Someone would end up dead. Zaron needed to inform Caleb and Jonathan because they were the heirs of the three major families in Eagle City. He wanted to tell them so they could be mentally prepared. With that out of the way, he said, "Let's see how things play out tomorrow. Get over here." The bodyguards immediately entered the room and stood up straight. Zaron looked at them with a cold gaze. He said coldly, "You useless things. Get Mr. Miller here. I need him for tomorrow." "Yes, sir." The bodyguards left in a hurry. Meanwhile, Faye received multiple calls at the hotel, all of them urging her to return home. However, she kept using travel delays as an excuse. She told them she could only make it in the afternoon. The final call she received was from her grandfather himself. He lectured Faye sternly and told her to show up on time by tomorrow. Faye looked worried and sorrowful after she hung up. Wilbur comforted her by saying, "Don't worry. I'm here. Grandpa is very stubborn, so I'm afraid that I'll make him angry." Her grandpa founded the Eves Enterprise, so he was an irreplaceable patriarch in the family. He was the reason Fabian Eve chose to leave home. Fabian had conflicts with her grandfather back then, and he left because they hated each other. Faye was worried that her grandfather could not take the news, but there was nothing else she could do, so she felt very conflicted and anxious. Wilbur noticed it and silently infused some spirit energy into her consciousness. Soon, Faye fell asleep. "Have a good night's sleep. I'll handle everything else. How will you meet your family like that?" Wilbur shook his head and carried Faye to the room so she could sleep soundly. After that, he began to meditate. Faye slept until 11 in the morning. She instantly panicked when she woke up and checked her watch. The celebration was happening in the lobby of the Hilton Hotel. The crowd was packed when they arrived, with around 700 people present. The Eves were busier than ever. The chairman of Eve Enterprise was her grandfather, Asher Eve. He was wearing a full red outfit with elegant patterns on it, and it looked very festive. He had a joyous smile on his face too as he welcomed the guests. It was his birthday, and all the famous figures in Eagle City were present. Asher knew that some of them only came for Justin Yeager. However, the Eves and the Yeagers would be family soon, which meant the Eves would be lifted to new heights. Asher had 3 sons. The eldest son was Wesley Eve. The second son was Freddie Eve, and the youngest son was Fabian Eve. They were all next to Asher at that moment. Asher's grandchildren and other relatives were busy greeting the guests. Wesley watched the lively crowd and had to sigh. He said, "You sure have great vision, Father. You refused to let those men marry Faye until Justin Yeager showed up. The Eves will soon rise to great heights." "Yeah, I can't recall how many competent and good-looking young men you rejected over the years. I see that you're saving Faye for the best candidate," Freddie chimed in. Fabian was the only one frowning. He said slowly, "I'm afraid there will be unexpected developments." "What did you say?" Asher instantly looked displeased.